Do you know what the most popular front-end interview question is? It's, can you build a counter? Today we're going to walk through everything you need to know to build your own project using React, including how to build this counter so you can ace your next job interview. Let's get started.
So when you use Create React App, it actually gives you a lot of like tools that you're able to see basically, it gives you instructions about what you're supposed to do. So they literally tell you, we suggest you begin by typing cd counter, cd, which stands for change directory. I'm not really going to get into the terminal and things like that. I do have videos on that on both my TikTok and my YouTube channel if you want to check those out. So we're going to type in cd counter. It's going to change the directory. So now we're in our counter folder, and then we're going to hit npm start. And that's going to start spinning up our React app. And now that counter folder that we just changed directory into, that's actually this one over on the left here, the one that says counter at the top. And you'll see that has a whole bunch of different files in here. While we wait for that to spin up, you'll see that we'll get some like different messages down here. And then we've like compiled it successfully. So you can see that we can see the counter in the browser over on the right here at localhost 3000, which is this URL up at the top right here. So this is just allowing us to develop locally on our computer. As I said, it's a really just quick way to get up and going if you want to just sort of like proof a concept and see how things are working in React, or really just test out React for yourself. All right, so let's get started. So if you've never worked with React, this is like the page that gets spun up every time you use Create React App. It has a whole bunch of different like pieces, logo, text, etc. We're not going to use any of that. What we're going to do actually is hop into the folders over here and sort of wipe all of that and start with a clean slate. So if we go into the top left here, we go into our source folder, and then we head down to app.js. App.js is basically where all of this stuff is living. And what we can do right here is we can take a look at app.js. So we see that it's a functional component right here. It's importing a couple of different things. It's importing logo, which is the spinning logo right here. It's importing some CSS, which accounts for the stylings on the page right now. And then it has, just a div with some information in the middle. If you haven't worked with React before, it's a combination, well, it uses JSX, which is a combination of JavaScript and HTML. So you're kind of seeing that on the page right now where you have this function, but it's returning HTML. So it's really funky if you've never worked with it before, but I think it's pretty cool. So anyway, what we're going to do now is just get rid of all of this piece in the middle here, and we're going to save that. And as you'll see, we have nothing on our app right now. So that means we've done something right, hopefully. But yeah, let's go ahead and build out our counter. So when you get asked to build a counter, they're not really going to be looking for like crazy stylings or anything like that. We can add a couple of little styles to make our thing look a little bit better, but for the most part, you want to just do something that's going to be logically functional. First thing I'm going to do here is actually change this into, well, I'm going to leave it as it is. I'm going to create a folder here called components. This is just a habit of mine that I always create a components folder and then I put everything in the components folder, just sort of like keep my code organized. If it's a larger project, you'll see like folders within the component folder. But for now, it's just one folder. So I'm going to create a new file now, and I'm going to call that counter. So this is where our counter is actually going to live. And this file that I'm creating here, it's going to be a React component. And so React is built on this idea of reusable components, these reusable pieces of code that are basically very modular in nature and allows you to sort of build apps and scale very quickly, as opposed to sort of like building pieces individually and then copying and pasting them and modifying them as necessary. We can sort of be a little bit more semantic in the way we do things. So building the counter, I'm actually going to use a little emit function, I believe it is, called ES7 snippets. That basically creates an arrow function based on the title of the file. It's pretty cool. So if I hit that, it's actually going to build out a functional component based on the title of the file, which is counter, and then it's going to return just a div with counter in it and export the counter component itself. So super quick. That was like a really quick way to make a component. Down here if I hop back over to app, I'm actually just going to import it now, and it'll actually auto import if I start typing it out like an element. And you can see right here, it's like offered to import it from ./component/counter. So I can just bring that in there and save. All right, and if you look over on the right here, you'll see that we actually have the counter popped up already. So we're in a good place. It's actually working. We know that we've like connected our pieces correctly. Awesome. So the next thing we want to do, right, in our counter example, we have this like 0, and then we have a plus, and we have a minus. We might even add a reset button just to be like, really useful. The plus is green, the minus is red. We don't have to do that, but we can. But first things first, we're gonna need 3 things. We're gonna need the at least 2 buttons, and we're gonna need a display for the count. So let's do an H1. Oops. Let's do an H1 here with just the title of the page. So we'll keep that counter. And then below this, we're going to do the actual count. So I'm just going to do, let's do an H2 with a 0 in it for now. And then we're going to do 2 buttons. So we're going to do button, and this is +1. And then we're going to do a second button here, which is -1. I'm going to save that. All right, cool. So we have our 0, we have +1, and we have -1. Awesome. Next thing we're going to want to do is like make it do something, right? Because like right now when I click +1 and -1, absolutely nothing happens. So let's hook it up and actually take advantage of, why part of the reason why we're using React. So one awesome thing that React allows us to work with is state. And I have some videos on my website about state and how to work with state and what state is. But in a nutshell, state is essentially like the actual like current representation of what something is. So let me put it into place, and then maybe you can ask questions if you have questions after I've sort of given you an example of it. So what we want to do here is initialize a variable that we can basically use to represent this actual count, this 0 over here, right? So even before we start talking about state, if I were to go const count equals 0, and then just replace this 0 right here with count and save that, you'll notice that the value actually hasn't changed because we've just literally replaced the 0 we had with the 0. If I changed it to 100, you'll see that it changes to 100. So we're just using a variable to give it, whatever number we want to do. So we can now use that variable and assign different values to that variable much more easily than like literally manually putting in 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. Right? So where state comes into this is we can actually sort of hook in to this variable and set the state, set the value of this variable based on what's going on in the app. So what I want to do now is import a hook called useState from React. And a hook is essentially just a function that React, or we can create per customized hook, but in this case, React has created for us, and we're going to utilize and leverage some of its functionality. So when I create my hook called useState, I can now attach it to my count variable here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put square brackets around count. So the first half of the useState hook, the variable that we're initializing here is count. So we're creating a variable called count, and then we're also creating something called set count, which is actually going to be a function. And how that works is we will take the useState hook, useState, and we're going to wrap our variable with it. And based on that that sort of convention, that naming structure, React knows that count is going to be our variable. So the first part is going to be our variable, and then the and then on click, we want it to do something, right? So on click, we want it to set the count, and then we don't want it to just be 1, right? We don't want to just set the count to 1 and that's it, right? No, we want to set the count to whatever the count currently is +1 and save that. And so now if we've done it right, when we click +1, it should just increment by 1. Awesome. But we can't decrement it now. So let's set up the other half. So again, going into the next button, this is -1 now. We're going to set another onClick equals, then we're going to call set count. And this time, again, grabbing that count variable. So whatever it is, as it's 14 now, I want to grab it at 14. That is the current state of the count variable, right? I want to grab count and then subtract 1 every time this button is clicked. And so then if I looked it up correctly, when I hit -1, it should subtract 1. Awesome, really good. So we have the -1, we have the +1, it's working pretty well. What if we wanted to actually start from 0 every time? So say I'm at 10, and I don't want to, like I've counted to 10, I want to start from 0 again. That's where a reset button could be really useful. So if I go ahead, let me wrap these two in a div just to make them look a little bit prettier when I do this. I'm going to create one last button, and we're going to create, so let's create the button, and we're going to call it reset. We're going to save that, so it should pop up right underneath. Good. Next thing we're going to do is add that onClick function now, right? So we're going to go onClick equals, and then this one's going to be a little bit different. We're still going to call setCount, but instead of it being count plus 1, count plus 0, because it's a reset, we really don't care what count is. We just want count to be a certain value. So we're going to click set count to be 0. And so if we hook this up correctly, when we hit set count, or when we hit reset, it should set count to be 0. Awesome. And then let's just double check. Our +1 is working, our -1 is working, and our reset is bringing us to 0. So that's like a super, super, super quick way to create a counter. As I said, we could add styles and we could do this and that and the other to make it look sort of a bit more pretty. We could wrap things in different divs and use flexbox and whatever, right? Bunch of stuff we could do. Not all of it is strictly necessary in terms of this as an interview question. As an interview question, this is sort of the most interviewers probably going to ask you. The reset button might be their like extra bonus, because you know when you go into a tech interview, usually what they ask you to do is to build one thing and then to sort of like add on to it and do something additional. So you want to make sure that you actually do the first thing well and it works. So we did our +1 and we -1 and it worked well, and then you do that add-on. That reset button is like your additional piece. All right, let me take any questions that we have in the comments here, if any at all. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So hi, I'm Zoe. Today we're going to be building a ToDo app using Next.js, Material UI, of course React, TypeScript, and a few other tools that we'll install along the way. So if you're not already following along, head over to Davidson Programming Academy on YouTube to follow along, and subscribe if you want to comment on the stream and things like that. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to be doing is, we're going to be trying build this app right here. So it's just a simple to-do app with a little linear gradient background. You can add a new to-do. You can add a to-do number 3. You can submit the to-do or just submit it by hitting enter. You can delete the to-dos, and then also when you refresh, the to-dos will persist on the page. So that's what we're trying to achieve here with our tutorial today. So let's go ahead and actually start this. So to start this, we're going to use a starter template just to get up and running a little bit faster. And it's this one right here, mux-ts, just because putting all 3 of Next.js, MUI, and TypeScript together takes a little bit longer, and I don't want us to waste time doing that. So what I've done already is created a repository here that I'm just going to clone to my computer, and we're going to get started with that. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and get this one opened, and awesome, we can go from there. All right, so the first thing we'll want to do, like we usually do when you open up an NPM project, is you want to go ahead and install. So we're going to type in npm I and install the packages in the project. Following that, so once that completes, we are going to go ahead and run it, and we should be able to pop it up on the side here. So let's do npm run dev. Awesome, and it's started. And if I go to localhost 3000, it should pop up over here. Awesome, cool. So we have our next app up and running. Great. Now what we want to do is actually go ahead and build our to-do app. So as we saw in the example, right, we want to have, there's like a few different components we want to think about when we're thinking about building this app. We have the larger to-do container, we have this input, we have this header, we have a button, we have individual to-dos, there's the ability to delete, to check, the check state. So there are a whole bunch of things we're going to need to consider as we're building this project. So let's go ahead and get started. So hopping back over to our code, let's go ahead and create a new folder. I'm going to call it components. And I'm going to create a new file within that. I'm going to call it ToDo container, and that's just going to be our container. Now I'm using TypeScript in this, so it's going to be a .tsx file, and that just allows us to be sure that we're passing the correct types around in our project. So I'm just going to use our React function arrow component, create the ToDo container component, and then we're going to go to pages, the index, and we're going to basically clear out everything that's in our Next.js right here, and then we're just going to put in our ToDo app. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to do ToDo app, and then we're going to clear out everything in this middle section right here. And if you do have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or let me know, and I'll periodically hop in and answer them. All right, so we're gonna import ToDo container and save that. And great, so we can see it up here. ToDo container has been imported. Awesome, working so far. The next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna get rid of a few of these like built-in styles and things like that. Get rid of these files that we don't necessarily need. Next thing we're gonna do is we are going to change the background, right? So we want the background of this whole app to be some sort of linear gradient or something. So what I'm going to do is look up the CSS for a linear gradient. And let's see. This is the pretty good color, I think. So I'm just going to copy this here. I mean, they have a few different options, but this seems pretty simple, a little bit more minimalist. So we're going to use that one for our app here. So to do that, I'm actually just going to put it as a style on the whole page here. So I'm just going to add an inline style of background and save that. And because this is in React, we do need to put some quotes around that and save that. And there we go. We see that it's given the background, but just to a really tiny portion. So what we got to do now is actually set the entire height of that container. So we want to do height 100 view height. So it's going to be 100% of the height of whatever container it's in. Awesome. So we have our little container. It's working so far. I think there's another property actually that I can add, which is like a turn. So I can kind of give it a little bit of turn. So I can do like a 0.125 turn, I believe is the property. And if I save that, yeah, the linear gradient kind of shifts to the side. So just gives it a little bit of a difference from, not literally copying and pasting what's there. All right, cool. We should be good with this. Oh, you know what? One more thing. I do want the ToDo container to be centered on the page. And the easiest way to do that for me right now would be to change this to a flex box. So if I do display flex and save that, and then if I do flex, justify content center and save that, as you can see now, it's there centered on the page. Awesome. So we can kind of close this out for the moment and then focus on our ToDo container itself. Now, if you notice in our example, right, it was this like white background with, the nicely curved edges and things like that, and it was a little bit down from the page. So let's go ahead and start building that part out. So in the container itself, we want to add some styles, right? So style, we want to have a background color, and it's going to be white. And then we want the max height to probably be about like 50 view height for the moment. We'll just leave it at that. And then we're going to set the margin, the top margin, to maybe be 5 rem. Or 5 view height, or 10 view height maybe. That looks good for now. One more thing I wanted to add is some padding. So let's do 2 rem all around for padding. And then the border radius. So I'm going to do a border radius of 1 rem and save that. Cool. So it's looking kind of closer to what we have here. I think we also probably want to do a minimum width of maybe, I don't know, 20 view width. Maybe a bit more than that. Let's do 40. All right, that looks a bit better. Cool. So we have it, and it's actually going to shift size depending on the size of our page. So maybe 30, 40, depending on the size of our page. We can think about that. All right, and yeah, so question in the chat. If you want to see the screen, hop on to YouTube. I've dropped a link in the chat earlier on. Should be like the first comment there. I'll try and pin it again. No, it's not letting me pin it. But yeah, if you just scroll up to the top, first comment in there is a link to the YouTube channel. It's also just called Davidson Programming Academy on YouTube. And you can totally follow along with the entire screen sharing live tutorial. All right, so moving forward, the next thing we're going to want to do here, let's add this little header right here, this H1. So because we're using Material UI, we have different components, pre-built components that we can interact with, and one of them is called typography. So what we can do is use this typography container, or typography component, sorry, and then we're going to type in to do and close that out. And then to use a typography component, because right now you see we're using it as just like regular text, we actually have to use something called a variant. And we're going to use the H1 variant because every page should have an H1. Now, as you can see, that's like way too big. There are two ways to handle this. One, we could kind of dive into the themes of Material UI and the styles related to the themes and basically create our own custom H1. We could do that, but seeing as this is a one-off for one page, I'm just going to use the SX property, which is a special, basically the style property for Material UI components that allows us to override the typical CSS styles, and we're just going to use that instead. So we're going to type in SX, and then I'm going to use the font size of, I don't know, let's say 3 rem. And then we'll do font weight of, let's just do 500. Cool, that looks pretty good. All right, so we have our header, we have, oh, and we'll actually change it to to-dos. We have our header, we have our box, our container. Now we need some sort of like input box, a submit button, and the actual to-dos themselves, right? Cool. So for the input box, let's make up the to-dos first. Let's style these individual to-do items, and then we'll come back to the input. So in order to style the to-dos, we're going to need some mock data because we need some sort of mock to-dos to work with. So we'll do const mock to-dos, and we'll make it an array of to-do. So to-do 1, to-do 2, and to-do 3. So just an array of strings. And then what we'll do down at the bottom here is we're going to do to-do mock to-dos dot map. For each to-do, we want to return, and we could just do a div, right, with to-do, but what we're going to actually replace this with is a component. So right now they're just displaying as we expect. Oh, and we also need a key prompt. We'll fix that in a second. Key would be, let's use the to-do for now. So what we want to do here is we actually want to make components for each of these. So let's go ahead and create a new component. We're going to call it to-do item.tsx. Save that. And then we need to now style these and pass them into the component. So we can replace this div with to-do item, import it from to-do item. And you'll see right now it's just replacing with to-do item. And we're going to actually pass it to do. So to do. So instead of displaying it, it's going to be a self-closing element. It's giving us a little error now because we haven't actually added the property to do item, so let's do that. So to do item is going to take in to do, and it's going to be a string. So we need, because it's TypeScript, we need to create an interface or a type and just define what to do is. So to do is going to be of type string, and then these are of the props type. And then we're going to display the to-do in the div, and if you'll notice on the right-hand side, our to-dos have changed from to-do to to-do 1, to-do 2, to-do 3. So we see that it's actually working correctly. All right, I have a question in the chat. What's your question? Just drop it in the chat, and I will answer as I have time. If you're looking for a mentor, definitely check out the link on my page, on my bio, that will enable you to sign up for a free call with me, and we can discuss, what problems you're having. I can troubleshoot anything you need to work on. I have some free courses available as well, so totally up to you what you want to talk about, but definitely check out the link on my profile pages. All right, but yeah, any questions, please drop them in either the chat on YouTube or the chat on TikTok. All right, awesome. Next step, what we're going to do now is we're going to style these, right? So as you can see here, there's like this gray background here, and it spans the whole width of the container. So basically what we want to do, we want to go ahead and create that. So we're going to put a style of, let's see, we want to do a background color. I want to use an RGBA color. And I want to do like a gray, like a light gray, yeah, like that. So we're going to do background color. It's going to be that. And I'm going to put quotes. And then awesome, cool. Now they all have the background color I was kind of going for. But we do want some spacing and things like that. So let's add a margin bottom to each of them of 1 rem. And then let's add a border radius of, I don't know, let's say 0.5 rem. Not too much. Might be all right. Go with that for now. Cool. So we have our to-dos, and then we need a little bit of padding too. So let's do maybe another 0.5 rems of padding. All right, cool. Awesome. Looking pretty good. What's this also making me realize is that there's not enough space between the H1, the bottom of the H1, and the start of the to-do. So I'm going to hop back over to the to-do container, and I'm actually going to add some margin to the bottom of the actual header itself. So let's just add like 1 rem of margin there. Just give it a little bit of space. All right, so now we have our 3 to-dos displaying, but if you notice, we're missing a couple of things. We're missing this like checkbox, and we're also missing this delete button. So what we're gonna do is add that within the to-do item component, right? So we wanna be very cognizant of sort of like repeating our code too much. So by creating this to-do item component, we're actually saving a lot of time in the future as new items, new to-dos are created. Basically, we'll create this one component, and if we ever need to change the stylings, it will change the stylings for all of the components. So let's go ahead and do that. So I am going to go over to, I believe there's a material UI component. So let's do MUI checkboxes. I believe there is a particular checkbox we can use. Yeah, so we want something just like that, right? So a checkbox. So I'm going to copy this and import it into our to-do. So we'll bring that there. And we just need to tell it that we're importing it from Material UI. And we don't have a label for this one, so we'll just leave that as it is. All right, awesome. So we have our to-do, we have our checkbox, and it works. And now we just need a trash can. So I think I might have a trash can already on my computer. Let's see if I can find it. Let's see. All right, yeah, I've got one right here. So let me copy that and drop it in the public folder here. So with Next.js, you want to put your images in the public folder because that's where it knows to look for it. So we have a big trash can here, a PNG, so we can now access this and use it in our app. So we also want to use something called Next image, or the image component from Next. This one right, oops, that one right there, yeah. And we're going to add the source, which is going to be / I believe it was delete.png. And the alt, because it should always, your images should always have an alt, should be delete button. We should actually make this into a button just to be accessible. We're getting an error here, and it's saying that we must use width and height properties or layout equals fill. So I'm going to give this a width of, let's say, 16 and a height of 16 as well, and save that. And there we go. We have our little trash can. But you'll notice that everything's sort of like clumped together on one side. So what we want to do right now is we want to actually separate them so that there's a little bit of distance between them. So what I'm gonna do is wrap the checkbox in the to-do. So I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna create another div here and wrap those two there. And then I'm going to make this outer div, I'm gonna make it a flex box. So I'm gonna create display flex. And then we're gonna do justify content. We're gonna write in space between. And then that should push them to the other sides. I'm also going to wrap this button, this image in a button, and see if that helps at all with that interesting styling we've got going on there. All right, cool. That's looking a little bit more normal. And then with this one here, I'm also, if you notice, they're slightly off, like the top and the bottom of the items are slightly off. So what I'm going to do here is make this also a flex box and just align the top and the bottom there. Display flex, and then we're going to do align items center and save that. Awesome. Cool, so we have our checkbox, we have our to-do, whatever our to-do will be, and then we have our delete button. One last thing I want to do before we finish up with this component is actually remove some of these extra stylings from the delete button, because those are sort of just the built-in stylings for a button. So if we go to the button and we add in the style prop again, we're going to remove the border. So we're going to type in border none, and then we're going to type also, we're going to have no background. So background will also be none. Oops, none. And if we save that, awesome. We have no background, no border, we just have a button and a checkbox. Any questions? No questions. All right, well, if you're new, please scroll to the top and check out the link on the YouTube channel if you're on TikTok, because we do have a screen share that's going on with this that you can actually just follow along with the tutorial. Cool. So continuing on. So we have our, where did it go? Oh, sorry. So we have our checkbox, we have our to-do, we have our delete button. Now let's worry about our input and our submit button, right? So when we add in a new to-do, we want it, when we hit our submit button, we want it to populate to this list, right? So there are a couple of things we want to consider when we're doing this. We probably want to start thinking about creating some sort of store. So like in the Redux sense, or using Zustand or something like that. So we're able to basically store all of our data in one location, and also so that our data will persist across like page reloads and things like that, right? Because right now when I reload this page, this stays because I've put it in local storage. So let's work on adding that feature to it. All right, so we're gonna go back to to-do container, and we're gonna add another piece here, which is, I believe it is, let's look it up. It's the MUI text input, text field, right? Okay, so I think we want to do this like outlined one here, so I'm gonna copy that. I'm gonna paste that in here. Oops, that is all of them, just want one. Save that, and we're going to import this from Material UI. Awesome. And if we look at our app, we have our little outline there. Cool. The other thing I want to do now, because this is going to be kind of like a form component, I'm going to wrap it in the form element. So I'm going to type in form and just wrap that in a form, and then also add a button here. We're going to use a MUI button, and we're going to type in submit for that one. I think they do have different variants of this button. Let me look it up here. Actually, that might be a little easier. Leave button. And yeah, so I think I'm going to go with a contain button. So we're going to type in variant equals contained and save that. And then similar to how we adjusted the styles of the header, because this is a like blue button, I don't really want that kind of vibe for it. So I'm going to type in SX and add in the background. We're just going to actually copy the background color from that page that I said we were done with. I'm just going to borrow this from that and use that as our background. So it kind of has a similar style to the rest of the page. All right, awesome. It's looking a little bit wonky still. I think we need a couple of things. So I think for our form component, we need a display flex. Big fan of flex boxes. Display flex. We're gonna do, align items into the center, so that button kind of shrinks down a little bit. And what else are we gonna do here? We're gonna do justify content space between, similar to how we did the to-dos and we had the button sort of spaced from the actual test itself. So space between, we're gonna save that. All right, awesome. So if you notice when I get it big enough, you'll see that there's a little space there. One last thing I'm gonna do is just add a little margin on the bottom there, similar to how we did it with the header, just so that there's a little room between the top and the bottom. So we're gonna do margin, margin bottom. one rem and save that. All right, awesome, cool, looking a lot better now. One thing I'm going to add to the text field now, as you see, we don't necessarily have that margin to the right all the time, but we do want it. I'm going to add margin right of 1 rem and save that. All right, cool. So we should always have a little bit of space there. Things are looking a lot cleaner. So any questions in the chat? All right, no questions in the chat. Well, if anybody has any questions, let me know. Let's hop over and work on the actual logic behind this. So as I mentioned, we want to think about using Zustand or Redux for this. So we want to install one of these as a package, probably. So I think because it's fairly simple what we're trying to do, I think I'm going to want to use Zustand. Let me just look up the documentation on that. All right, so we have npm installed Zustand, that's how we install it, and then we can create a pretty simple store here, which is really all we need. We just need to be able to like add to-dos, delete to-dos, and maybe track whether they're checked or unchecked. Maybe we can do that in the state as well at the end if we really want to. So let's go ahead and install Zustand. All right, cool. So now that we have Zustand installed, and if you guys can't hear me properly, just let me know. We are gonna hop over and I'm gonna create a new folder. I'm gonna call it store. I'm gonna create a new file called index.ts, and let's follow this format here. So we're gonna import create from Zustand. Awesome, and then we're going to create a store. So const use store equals create set and then we're going to use to-dos instead of bears. They use bears, we're going to use to-do. So for our to-do is going to be probably an object with, it's going to have an ID, which is going to be a string. And actually, let's create the type of to-dos here. So let's create one more folder first. We're going to call it types, and we're going to create one more index.ts. So we're going to create export type to do. And so, okay, well, let me think about what we want it to do to have, right? So we want it to have an ID, as I mentioned. So that's going to make it easier for us to delete. So an ID, which is a string. We want it to have whatever the to-do actually is. So let's call that the description. And that's going to be a string as well. And then, as I mentioned, we might want to have that feature where we're able to toggle it. So let's call that checked, and like whether or not it's checked or unchecked. And we are going to have that be a Boolean, so true or false, checked or unchecked. All right, so now that we have our type, we can say that the to-do is going to be, initially it's just going to be an empty array, and we're going to do to-dos. It's an empty array of to-dos. What's going on there? This should be within this. That should be over there. All right, so to-dos is an empty array. And then we want to add to-do, so that'll be our first action. So what we want to do here is we want to create an arrow function, and then using that set, we want to set the state to be, what do we do? So following this, I'm looking on the right here at the Zustand documentation. So we're accessing to-dos, we're setting to-dos to be, and then how do we want to do this? We want to do, it has to be like the array. So like whatever is currently in the array of to-dos plus whatever new to-do, right? So we want to set the state to be, I think it's state.todos. Yeah, that's how they do it. State.todos, comma to do, and that would be the new to do. Oh, and we should add to do here so it knows what we're talking about. And to do would be of type to do, which I should import so it works properly. Cool. All right, so do, comma there. State. Oh yeah, we don't have a type there. So the type for this, I believe they do have some documentation on this. We're using the TypeScript. I believe the type is like you want to just create this as a type. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's interface store, and it's going to be to-dos, which is an array of to-do. And then we're going to have add to-do, which is going to take in a to-do, which is of to-do. Or no, sorry, it's not going to take in a to-do. What it's actually going to take is in a description, because we're actually going to generate, yeah, let's do that instead. So add to-do is going to take in a description, which is of type string, and it's just going to return void. So in this here, what I'm going to do actually is create an object, because really each of, as we defined it here, a to-do is actually an object. So it's going to have an ID, a description, and a check state. And when we're adding this, we want to automatically generate an ID. We don't want, like, the person who's adding a to-do is not thinking about whether or not they're like adding the to-do. So what we want to do here is actually have this be, like, we're going to generate the ID at this step. So we're going to do ID, and we're going to generate it using, I believe it's the UUID library. Yeah, npm install UUID. And that, we're going to use this import v4 is UUID. And then we're going to generate a UUID when the time is necessary. And then the description will be the description. And then we'll add that check state because we've specified that it's there. And checked will be false to begin with. One more thing we haven't done yet is add in the state, I believe. Yeah, you just add it right after create. So we're going to use, we're actually going to call this to-do state and add that right there. All right, and we're going to save that. And we're getting an error now. Description are incomparable. Oh, because this is supposed to be a string. To-dos is missing in types. To-dos, never. Oh, I'm mixing up the D's. All right, cool. And that is just because it hasn't reloaded, I think. Or do I need to save dev? Let me try save dev to fix this error here. Okay, close that, open it back up. Awesome, error is fixed. So nothing has changed on the actual UI side. If you guys have any questions, do let me know. I know I'm kind of running through this, but I will make a longer, sort of more in-depth tutorial on like step-by-step how to do this if folks are interested in seeing that. Cool. And I can also, I see a comment in the YouTube chat, can I show my VS Code settings in settings.json? Definitely will make a tutorial on that as well. Thank you for the suggestion. If there's like a specific setting you're asking about though, do let me know. But yeah, continuing on with the tutorial here. So we've created this add to do, right? So in theory, when we call this action use to do, we should be able to access it. And one more thing I've noticed here is we also want to export this so we can access it in the container. So let's go ahead and like try this out and see if we can get it to work. So if we go to do container, we want to basically add to this list of to-dos every time we hit the button submit. So two things we're gonna have to do here first. First, we're gonna have to access all of these to-dos. So if we go to the documentation here, we can see how to access these actions. So right here, we can create basically just a variable, and I'll call it to-dos because this is going to be the real to-dos once we have them. So to-dos equals use store, or yeah, it's use store, we call it. And then we're going to take the state, and we want to return state.todos. Simple enough, that will be our to-dos. And if I change this from mock to-dos to to-dos, we should have absolutely nothing on the page because we don't have any to-dos yet. You'll also notice that we're getting a type error now. That's because we do have to go in and change our types here. So let's go ahead and change this to the type of to-do from types. Save that. And then we're going to change this. This is where we had the actual to-do laid out. Instead of it being to-do, it's going to be to-do.description because that's going to be the actual description there. And then the other thing here we can do is change our key from just the to-do name to the key, the to-do.id. So you know it's going to be a unique string. Awesome. So next we want to do is actually call add to do. So when we want to call that is when we actually hit the submit button. So I'm going to create a function to do that. Well, let's grab the function. Let's grab the actual action from the store. So we're going to create add to do's, and we're going to use store state dot add to do. All right, cool. And then we want to then call this in a handler function. So I want to create the handler function. So handle submit click, or maybe just handle submit. And we want to pass in the event. So we go back here. So on submit of this button, we want to do two things. We want to do event.prevent default, so the page doesn't reload. And then we want to call add to-dos with the value of that item, of the input. So add to-dos will then be event.target, and we want to target the first object because there are two objects that will be, so we're going to pass this into the form component, and it's going to be the text field and the button that we're targeting here. So we want to target the first object because there will be two objects within the form component. So we want to target the first object and the value of that object, and that's what we're going to add to the to-do, add the description. So we'll go to form and we'll hit, we need to do things. We need to add to the button, we need to add the type of submit, and then form has a special property called on submit, and then we're going to handle submit, and then we just need to figure out the correct that's probably not right. I think it's this one. This is the type React form handler. I think it's actually an input element. Save that. Maybe not. The event handler. No, that's not it. Let's see if I can figure this out. Well, that's definitely not right, but let's see if this works. I think this is the same thing I wrote earlier, to be honest, but no, not that. All right, let's go ahead and check GitHub. Let's see what we did the last time we did this. All right, I don't know if we actually found a solution for this. Let's put it as type any for now, which is not recommended, but this is what we're going to do to just get it to work for the moment so I can continue and show you what's going on. We're going to get rid of mock to-dos and save that. And then, assuming we did everything right, it should just add to-do. So if I do to-do number 1 and submit that. There we go. Our to-dos are working. They're actually populating correctly, and you know, they're showing up where we want them to. But if you note, I mean, we can check and uncheck, but if you notice, we can't like delete them. I'm pretty sure this check and unchecked is not showing up in our store. So we do need to add a few more features. Again, if you're just joining us, definitely hop over to YouTube. That's Davidson Programming Academy on YouTube. And you can follow along with the screen share tutorial that I have on the big screen here. All right, so the next thing we're going to want to do now is we're going to want to add in that additional functionality, right? Because if you'll notice in the original app here, I actually have like a little strike through and the color changes when we actually hit that check state. And then, you know, we do have the delete button that actually works. So let's try and implement both of those things. First, let's implement the delete. So we're going to create another, back into our store, we're going to create another action called remove to do. And it's going to actually take in the ID, which is going to be of type string. And it's going to be pretty similar. It's going to return void. Save that. And then it's getting upset because we don't have it here, but we're going to add it, remove to do. And then again, ID, type string. And then it's going to set it to be of type. So when we get the to do, we want to basically go through all of the to-dos. So we want to go to-dos will be to-dos dot filter for, let's look up dot filter. Because this will return the array minus whatever component we remove. So we want to do to-dos.filter where to-dos, and we want to make sure I'm doing this correctly. This is to-dos dot ID does not equal ID. Think that should, oh, no. To-dos.filter. Oh, state.todos, my bad. State.todos does not equal state.todos dot I. State.todos dot filter. State.todos dot filter. What was it? Where did I put it? Let's go back to GitHub. Oh, I have to check it on my other page. Hold on. All right. Oh, my bad. I did the check at the wrong point. All right. So what we want to do is to-dos is state.todos dot filter, and I need to pass to do. That would be really useful. All right. That's what the little error was there. All right. So filter for to do, and then it's going to be to do dot ID does not equal ID. That's what had to happen. All right. Cool. So let's add a couple of to-dos. Let's to-do 1, to-do 2. I'll save those things. And then what we're going to do after that is we want to add this remove to-do. We want to add it to our delete button. So we're going to go into our to-do item, and then we're going to actually import that. So we're going to create remove to-do equals, what is it, use store from store, and then we're going to pass in the state, and it's going to be state.remove to do. We're going to save that. All right, and then we're going to call remove to do on the button click. So on click, just call remove to do, and that should be pretty straightforward. On click, ID. Oh, you know what? That's right. It's going to have to be, let's create another handler. So let's do same thing as before, basically. Const handle remove to do. Event, we're going to do event.prevent default. We're going to go with any for now, but we'll refactor that later. And then we're going to hit remove to do, which is going to be the, or no, you know what? That's silly. We just need to pass remove to do. And we're just going to pass in to do.id. That should be totally sufficient. Don't need to do a whole bunch of stuff. All right, cool. And then let's try it. Cool, awesome. So yeah, add like 10 to-dos and they go away. Awesome, so that's working. Any questions in the comments before I hop on to the next piece? No? Okay, cool. Do let me know if you have any questions. All right, so yeah, next thing we're gonna do here is we are going to, let's see, we want it to persist, right? So right now, if I refresh the page, all my to-dos are gone. And we don't want that to happen. We want it to stay. We want to come back to our to-do app and use it every day and, you know, have it persist. So I believe there is a function quite literally called persist. And we want to use that. And it's not persist, so stand. Okay. Yes, this is it. But I think with TypeScript, there's like another level, something to do with DevTools. TypeScript guide. Yes, it's this one right here. So this is what we want to follow, this formatting to basically add to our store to allow it to persist long-term, you know, in local storage or session storage should you choose to change it. So what we're going to do here is just refactor our store ever so slightly. So we are going to, instead of passing set here, okay, so that set is basically just going to move down. And it seems like everything within that stays the same. So I'm just going to move this down here, close this, and open it back up. Okay, and then I'm going to import DevTools. From Zust, I'm going to import this line right here, DevTools and persist from Zustand middleware. And then we're going to do DevTools and then persist. And then we're going to move this up. Is all of that inside or else? All of that is inside this. Yeah. All right. So we're just going to move those two up. And I should be able to just save. No, probably did something wrong. Probably missed a step. Oh, 2 arguments. Sorry. It needs a second argument. So that second argument it needs is the name of the store because I'll show you in a minute in the application. But basically it's going to like give it a label. So we have persist and then we are going to have the second argument here, which is going to be name and we're going to call it to-do store. We're going to save that. And, oh, did I put it in? Need to move it up one. Yeah, that was it. Cool. All right. Awesome. So I think that's all we need to do in order to make it persist. Oh, cannot use in. Let me see if I refresh. Okay, that was just a temporary error. So let's do to-do number 1, to-do number 2, and then let's refresh the page. Oh, there's a hydration error. Right. So with, I think it's a version of Next that it's using, but we do need to fix the hydration error. Let me pull it up again and search for it. Next.js, yes. There are like 2 or 3 ways to fix this. We're going to use this first one, using a use effect, going back to that page that I thought we were done with. Yeah, so we're going to add a use effect in here. And basically what this code is doing is basically just ensuring that the page is matching what it should. So it's going to load, and then it's going to like load the actual page. We're going to use effect here, and you'll see this in a second. So if I wrap this in an is client ternary, sorry, not tertiary, ternary, and then I say if it is the client, we're going to show to-do container. If not, we're going to say loading. I'm going to go dot dot dot. If you look up, so I'm going to do a refresh of this page. If you look up in the top left corner here, you'll see loading very, very briefly show up. So briefly, it didn't even show up, but I think it's in the middle. Loading, yeah, right there. So it's there, you just can barely see it. All right, so fix the hydration error. We have to-dos that are deleting, they're persisting. The last thing we want to do is we want to add the ability for it to check and basically cross the line through the actual to-do. So what we're going to do here is we want to add a third and final action called toggle checked. And we are going to take in, I think it's the ID again we want for that, yeah. And then we're going to return void, and then we're going to add it to the bottom here. And it's going to be toggle checked. We're going to take in the ID, and then it's going to be string, and we're going to call set state. Oops. And then now for this one, what we want to do is actually, we want to take our to-dos. We're going to do a map of the to-dos. And then for each to-do, why did you not like that? Oh, you know what? My bad. To-dos. To-dos that map. For each to-do, we want to check to see if the if this is the to-do we're looking for. So to-do.id. If it is, then we want to set ID. No, sorry, we want to do checked. To-do.id. No, to-do.id equals the ID we're trying to check. So to-do.id, and then we want to do dot 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 to do, and then checked is not to do. So whatever the to do was previously, so if it was checked, we want it unchecked. If it was unchecked, we want it checked. To do dot checked, and save that. Or it's going to be just the regular to do. So if it's not checked or unchecked, then we want it to just be to do. To do explicitly has any. I think I just need to change this to do. No. But it is good to be a little bit more consistent. All right. Whoops, that was not. All right, to do. Well, it's just of the type to do. To-dos.map. To-dos.map. Cannot find name to-dos. Oh, state.todos, my bad. State.todos.map. Oh, we already have it. .map. All right, awesome. Cool. So that should allow us to toggle the checks. Let me go over what we have here. So we have the to-dos will now be all the to-dos. We map through the to-dos. We check to see if that to-do has the ID of the ID that we're going to check for when we hit that toggle button. And then we're going to, if it does, we're going to return all the to-dos. And the checked of that particular to-do will be the opposite of the check, whether it was checked or unchecked, right? Because it's a toggle. And then, or we're just going to return the to-do. So now that we have that logic in place, let's go and implement it. So if we go to our to-do item again, we're going to go to the checkbox, and there's a particular property here. Let's do const toggle checkbox, because I think we're going to need to use the event on this. On click equals toggle checkbox, and we're gonna pass in the event, and let me double check the checkbox API from MUI. Checkbox API. Because I'm pretty sure, yeah, it's like event.target.checked, and it's a React change event. That's the event we want. All right, so we want to do, toggle to do. Do you want to do it like this? Toggle checkbox. No, we could actually do it really simple. All right, let's do const toggle checked equals use store bracket state equals bracket state dot toggle checkbox. All right. Oops, not use state, use store. Cool. State dot toggle checked. Yes, that is what I want to say. And then on click, we're going to toggle checked, and then we're going to pass in the to-do.id. Cool. Awesome. So if I check it and I refresh, no, it doesn't persist. Why is that? I think we also need to set the checked, possibly. Maybe that's what it is. Yeah, so we do need to set whether or not checked is checked. All right, so checked would then be to-do.checked. So then if I check it, then I refresh. Right, okay, now it's staying. Awesome. So the other thing we want to do is we want to add some styling based on this, right? And this is the last thing we're going to do here as far as like styles and things like that go. So what we're going to do now is we want it to basically do a strike through, and they also want the like color to fade a little bit on the actual text itself. So let's do that. What we're going to do here is whenever we get to-do.check is true, we want that to be applied. So that is going to be on the to-do.description. We can actually go ahead and just wrap this in a typography component, and then use SX to, all right, so we're going to do, I think it's text decoration. Is it strike through? Let me look this up just in case. Line through, that would have been totally wrong. So line through, and we're gonna want this to be conditional. So if to-do.checked is true, to-do.checked, whoops, is true. To-do.checked is true. We want to do line through spelled correctly. If not, we want the text declaration to be none. And then the second one we're going to check on is if to-do.checked is true. And there are cleaner ways you can do this. I'm just doing it really quickly for the purpose of the demonstration. We're going to do color, to-do.checked. If it's true, we want the color to be, let's check to see what the color is right now, because I don't think it's exactly black. If you scroll into the CSS styles here, we can see, we can get the RGBA here. Okay, so it's a little lower in opacity. So grab that. And then, so if it is checked, I'm going to lower this to like 5. If not, we want it to be what it like normally. I think we can we do auto? We might be able to do auto. Yeah, awesome, cool. So we've added that styling in. I mean, there are little cleanup things we can do at this point. Like you see where in this block it says outline, we can change that. So we can have the label can be add your to do, you know, whatever we want to say. So that when you click on it, you know, you have a nice little prompt there to add your own to do. What else? What other things could we add? I think that might be it, to be honest. We've added in the ability to add to-dos. We've added in the ability to delete them. You know, we can check and uncheck them. We can refresh the page, and the checks and the unchecks persist. So yeah, this is a really simple way to build a to-do. To-dos are, you know, a sort of really simple project that you should be able to build. You don't have to go into all this detail in terms of styles and colors and things like that. But we've been going for about an hour and we've been able to build and style a full ToDo app. So it should be something that you can complete fairly quickly once you get the hang of it. If you do have any questions, please drop them in the chat, or follow me, subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can reach out to me directly at davidsonprogrammingacademy.com. You can schedule a call with me if you do have questions about coding or learning how to code. I do teach folks how to code for, in my spare time. And yeah, if you have any questions, please reach out to me. If not, I will see you in the next one. All right, bye. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and get started. So, hi, I'm Zoe. If you don't know me already, I am a software engineer and former professor, and I love educating folks on how to learn how to code. So today what we're going to go through is an API tutorial. We're just going to learn how to set up an API or how to access an API using a Next.js app. So we're going to work with React. We're going to use TypeScript, but we're going to use very similar syntax to JavaScript. If you've never worked with TypeScript, but you have worked with JavaScript, don't worry, it should be very similar. And we're going to work with Material UI for styling. So if you're not already subscribed on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. So without further ado, I'm going to give maybe 20 seconds and we're going to go ahead and get started. And just a little visual, this is what we're going to be building up here. So we're actually going to be building a country search app that basically allows you to, it's going to use this free REST countries API, and it's going to populate a whole bunch of countries, and we're going to access information like the type of the flag that they use, the name of the country, the region, and the capital, etc. We're going to use that in our project today. So let's go ahead and get started. So yeah, here's the example of the app. So if I type in a country like Canada, I can see that, it'll actually filter for me. It'll filter for the country and actually provide the country that we want to work with here. So we can also filter it by region. So if I wanted to, if I remove this from the search and I want to just filter by region, we can search for something that's in the Americas. We can search for something that's in Asia, in Europe, et cetera, et cetera. We can filter by these regions or just have all of them present itself. So the course today is going to be partially focused on the API and like getting it up and running. And then we'll transition to focusing on this logic and how to make sure the filter actually gets started. So without further ado, let's get started. So I have already gone ahead and spun up the app here. I'm using a template, a public template that I have on my GitHub here. So my GitHub is Zoë Davidson, or Z Davidson if you're American. And the repository name is mux-ts. So that's just to it's a template that I copied or cloned and forked from another user. But basically what it does is set up a Material UI, Next.js, and TypeScript app for you in a really quick way. So yeah, you can definitely use this if you're interested. I believe I'm using Next.js 14 in my version. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and use that, just check out my GitHub profile. It's, as I said, Zoë Davidson, and you can go ahead and clone that and use this for the project. Also on my profile, I'm going to have the code from this. So if you see this later and you want to go ahead and like check your code, it should be called something like country search. So you can go ahead and find that there. All right, so I've already gone ahead and spun up the app here. So you'll see that at localhost 3000, we have our Next.js app. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. So first thing I'm going to want to do here is go ahead and clear up what we have here. So we don't necessarily want it to say welcome to Next.js. So I'm going to go into my pages here in Next.js, into the index file here. And I'm going to go ahead and just remove all of this extra stuff that we have. So everything from main going down. I'm just going to clear that out and save that. Awesome. Cool. Blank white page. That's where we want to start with. The next thing we're going to want to do here is we want to sort of think about the different components we're going to have to add here. And if you've ever seen one of my tutorials before, you know that I like to start by making a folder for all of my components. So let's go ahead and do that. So on the right side here, I'm just going to make a new folder and I'm going to call it components. And we're going to save that. And then within that components folder, I'm probably going to start with a container file to sort of house everything that's going on in this project. So I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call it country search container. Save that and create that component. Awesome. And then I'll just go ahead and import it into the index.txx here. Cool. So we have that linked up and you can already see it showing up here in our on our page here. I'll just also go ahead and remove these styles from this div because we'll add in our own styles as we go through this. All right, awesome. So One thing I forgot to mention. This project is also going to have dark mode. We're going to be able to toggle between light and dark mode, and that's going to be something that we're going to actually start setting up now as we do our styling so that we don't have to think about it later. All right, cool. So to get started with this, let's hop into our country search container. And looking at this actually as our sort of example, we notice that we'll have a couple of different components that we need to make, right? So there's this sort of like larger header here that has the title and our dark mode button. And then we have this like country, the actual search sort of where the logic is going to live, because we have our input and we have our region, and then our select right here for the region. And basically what these two are going to do, they're going to allow us to do the filtering and display all of these different cards here. So I'm thinking we're going to have two containers that are going to be side by side, a header and a country search. So let's go ahead and build those out. So I'm going to start with the header. And we want our header to have two elements. And now, as I mentioned, we're going to be using Material UI for this. So I'm going to be using a lot of their pre-built components to sort of speed up everything here. And so we can really focus on, the API and the logic and those sort of more pressing things. So I'm going to start by using a box component here. It's exactly the same as a div, but it allows me to use SX props, which will be useful if we want to do things like media queries and stuff like that inline. And then I'm going to go ahead and, what was the name of it? Where in the world? And a dark mode button. I'm going to add a typography element for our title here. Cool. And I'll put the title in here. And then I'll make one more, and that's going to be the button element. And it's going to say dark mode. I'm going to save that. Awesome. And we need to actually import this into our country search container. So let me do that. specific to Next.js that we'll put it in index instead of app.tsx. But good question. Okay, awesome. So we've set the overall background color to this, but we can actually see the background isn't taking up 100% of the actual page. And that's because the app right now is not taking up 100% of the whole page. So what we want to do is actually set the height of the app to be 100 view height. Or let's go ahead and set the minimum height to be 100 view height. And then it'll expand as we get more pages. And we can tweak this as we need to. All right, so that's the first thing I wanted to tweak. Then we'll go back to the header, and then we can actually specify the background of the header specifically to be just white. So FFFFF. Awesome. Save that. And cool. You can kind of barely see it right now, but it will become a little bit more apparent when we add our box shadow. So the next thing I want to do is go ahead and add a box shadow to the bottom side of this so that we can see a little bit more difference between the header and the lower part of the project here. So I'll add in a box shadow. And if we just look up the syntax for box shadow here. And I'll copy this for now, and we'll just tweak it to suit our purposes. We don't need that piece, and we don't need this. Save that. So you can see we got a pretty gnarly box shadow. We're going to change it up just a little bit. We're going to set it to, I think it's like a light gray. And I don't want it left or right, so I'm going to just change. I really want just like a subtle box shadow, something like that. Awesome. So hopefully you're able to see a little bit more how the header and the rest of the components are now separated with just a little bit of styling in place. Cool. Any questions? Does style XS work? So it's the same. Yeah, so style and SX. So basically every styling framework you're going to use will be different. Material UI uses the style prop. Tailwind also, this is like inline styling we're using. So Material UI has the ability to use inline styling, and so does Tailwind CSS. So it's very similar in that way. All right. Hopping down into the next component. So we're going to create a new file, and this is going to be where sort of everything lives in our project. So I'm going to call it country search. So we have our country search container and then our country search like component. And we're going to save that. And I'm going to go ahead and import this into the country search container so that we can actually see it. And we'll save that. Import that. Awesome. So right there it is. Going to do the same thing here and transform that to a box. And add in some padding. We're just going to do 2 rem all around for now. Cool. Country search started. So we're going to need 2 aspects here. We're going to need this input, and we're also going to need this select. And those are going to, we're going to sort of start with like a baseline here, and then we'll add on to it as we go on. But these are 2 components that the form control here. Grab that, drop that in there, and I'm going to grab these as well. Otherwise, we're going to get a couple of errors, but we can change that later. Just add all of those missing imports. And cool. Should not be getting any more errors. Awesome. So we have our outlined input here, and then we have our select. That's a little bit too wide, so I'm just going to change that up, but I'll add in, let's set the width to like 15 rem for the time being, and we can always, or 15 view width for the time being, so it's a little bit more responsive, and then we can change that as necessary. We're also going to, I'm going to wrap these 2 in a box because we're also going to have our cards display on this page, so we want to sort of have them in these sections. So I'm going to wrap these 2 in a box and set the display to flex. And do the same thing we did above and justify the content to be spaced between so they separate and go to opposite ends of the page. Cool. And the other thing we want to do here, we're going to make this text input a little bit wider. So we're going to go width. We're going to set it to maybe 30 view width. Save that. Could even go up to 35. Cool, and we're gonna leave that as that. Next thing we want to do is sort of touch up the text and what the colors and things like that. So as I mentioned, we're gonna set the background color of these to white. So I'm gonna go set background color to be FFF. Save that, and I'm just gonna add this to the form control as well. Awesome, so they kind of stand out just a little bit more. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and change the label. So the label here should be search for a country, and over on the right it should be filter by region. So we'll add those in. Search for a country, and the other one here, it's going to be filter by region. Save that. All right, and we don't need these menu items. We actually are going to change them. So I added in an extra filter here. Also, by the way, this is all from Front-End Mentor. Front-End Mentor is a great resource to get sort of like starter projects to be able to work on building your portfolio as a front-end engineer. Not sponsored, not paid. This is totally free to use. So if you check out frontendmentor.io, you can like follow along with this exact design and information, or just use the version that's on my GitHub. It's pretty much the same thing. But in their design, they only had these 5 regions. I added a 6th region, an all-encompassing one, just so that we could do a reset if we wanted to sort of get out of one of the regions. Other ways you could have done that, but just I thought this was a pretty simple way. So we're going to go ahead and add all of these regions to our select here. So I'm going to add in, we're going to start with all. And save that. And then I believe it's 6 of them. Cool. And then we're going to go ahead and change this one to America, or I think it was Africa first. And then Americas. And Europe. And the names are important because they are it's going to be filter by region. Save that. Make it a little bit wider. Cool. Awesome. So now we have our filter right there. Perfect. So we have our basic sort of setup for the project right now. A couple more things we're going to want to set up. Most importantly is the cards. How are we going to actually display all of this data, all of this information? So let's go ahead and Material UI. Again, the reason I'm using Material UI is so we can kind of like sort of go quickly through all of the styling and then spend a lot more time on the API. So we're almost done with the styling. We're going to use the card element from Material UI. And we're going to use this media card. I'm just going to grab the code from this. And this is going to be our individual country card here. So we're going to use that. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to create some mock data that we're going to delete later. Const mock data. But what this mock data is just going to be is something for our something to basically loop over and to display a few different countries. So if we take a few countries, let's just say United States. Let's do map through the mock data. We're going to change this to real data later, but for now, map through the mock data. And then for each country, we want to return a card. And it's going to give me a lot of errors because I have not imported all of that stuff. So let me import all of it. And awesome. So we have our cards. Still giving me an error though. Oh, it's missing a key. So we need to add a key for each of these. And actually, sorry, you know what? I'm going to create a new component. We're going to call this just card or country card.tsx. And I'm going to put all of that in there because it's actually super messy right now. So I'm going to just cut all of this out, drop it into country card. Drop that there. Do the same import, add all of the missing imports, and then just use country card here. That'll really clean this up. All right, and then we're gonna set the key for now to be the name of the country because that should be unique because, you know, we should only have one name for every country. And you can already see that we are getting the sort of sample data displayed here. Not quite what we're looking for just yet, but sort of we're on the way. So what we're gonna do is just tweak the styling a little bit. So I'm gonna wrap this in a box so I can access, sort of work with the items a little bit more individually. So we're gonna do the same thing, display flex. And then, awesome. And then I'm gonna do a bit more individual styling on the card itself. So this is like pre-built sort of information, but I want to actually set the width to be, I don't know, let's say 20 view width. And then I want to have the, I want them to all have, or no, I want them to be spaced between here. So I want justify content to be space between, and, or let's set it to 25 view width, 20 view width. Cool. And how wide are they here? Yeah, that should be good for now. And then we're gonna actually set a little bit more margin just below this input box here. And what else do we need to do here? Oh, I think these are going to probably need a margin bottom as well. So we'll add that in now as we remember it. And what else do we need? I think that should be good for now. We're going to end up passing a whole bunch of props in here once we do hook it up to the API. But for now, this should be good. All right. Final thing I want to do in terms of styling at this stage is I want to hook up the dark mode, right? So right now when we click dark mode, absolutely nothing happens, but we want it to be like in the filtering bit a little later in the video. But for now, the other question was, how do you decide when to use box and div and like the empty arrow brackets? I typically use a box or a div when I know that I'm going to want to put some styles, in this case inline styling, onto the component. I could also use an empty element if, you know, I don't want to sort of clog up the space, but I know I'm going to be using a lot of sort of container type styling with these elements, so that's why I'm choosing to use boxes and divs. I'm not using divs very much just because boxes for me have a little bit more utility because I'm using Material UI. But again, boxes are Material UI specific, so just be aware of that if you try to use them. All right, so hopping back in, we're gonna go ahead and download or install Zustand into our project. And I believe these are the docs we want. Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and install Zustand to manage our state. So if I just go ahead and really quickly install this below. we can go ahead and hook this up in our project. All right, awesome, installed. So I'm going to create a new folder for my store. Function returning void. All right, awesome. And I think I just bring it in here. Store state. Save that. And we'll change these now to match so it doesn't give us an error. So is dark mode. We want to start out as false. We don't want to be in dark mode automatically. And then toggle dark mode. We want to set the state of dark mode, or is dark mode, to be whatever the state of dark mode is, but the opposite. So it's a toggle, right? So we want it to be whatever dark mode state is currently, just flip it. So that's what the exclamation mark here is. So it's just to flip, is it dark mode? Great, flip it to not dark mode. Flip it to light mode, or flip it back to dark mode. And so yeah, we're gonna use this throughout our app to basically trigger this. The second thing that we want to do, again, really awesome that we're using Material UI. We want to basically create this dark mode theme, right? So Material UI actually has a theme called light mode, basically built in to the app. Like when you go ahead and start it up, it has like a light theme option. I'm gonna want to grab the value of is dark mode. So let's grab that here. So we're gonna say is, oops, this is just the example text. We're gonna change that to is dark mode. And we're gonna use store, and we're gonna import it from our store. And then what we wanna do is check. So here on line 30, Material UI actually gives us a theme provider that's just going to wrap our entire app in whatever theme we are requesting. So we want to do a check here. So is it, if it is in dark mode, question mark, is dark mode? And if it is, we want to give it the dark theme. And if it isn't, we want to give it the light theme. So really simple check to sort of do our entire app in dark or light mode. So that should be all that we have to do in app.tsx. So we can close that out for now. The other thing we want to do is actually hook it up so that it actually does something when we toggle it, right? So in our button, this is back in our header here, we want to hook up our dark mode button there. We're going to give it an because we changed that. So let's go ahead and give those like custom colors. Let's have that toggle as well. So we can start in the header because we're already there. I'm going to go ahead and grab the value of is dark mode. And we're going to do this for every component. I mean, and granted, it's only like 2 or 3 components that we need to do this for. If it was something larger, maybe we'd take a different approach. Because it's not that many, we can just sort of target it where it's necessary. But in dark mode, I want to do the same check. So I want to check for the background color. If it is in dark mode, then I want to give it a dark mode color. So if I hop over here, I can grab the color from the web page here. And I'm just going to make it that color. This is just for the header. I'm just going to make it that color if it is in dark mode. And if it isn't, then we're just going to make it the white. Awesome. Getting there. And you'll see it already does the text. So all the text already flipped to white. So it was black before, turned to white. So we don't have to worry about that. All right, let's hop down. Let's close out the header and we'll hop down to our actual country search container here. Or country. We can hop to country search itself and work on that. So we want to do the exact same check here. We want to check for is dark mode. So const is dark mode equals use store from our store. We're going to take the state. And we're going to set state dot is dark mode. Grab state dot is dark mode, I should say, and we're going to do the check here. So in these 2 places where we're using the FFF, we're going to do is dark mode. We're going to check for that, and if it is, we want to hop in the middle here and drop in that color instead. And awesome. So working there. Cool. Perfect. Final place we want to change it is in this background here, which we're going to have to do in our index.tsx. So we'll do that one more time. But I think it's going to be a slightly different color. So let's just grab this, drop this in here, and import the use store, and save that. And then, yeah, we'll grab this background color. So a little bit darker, if you notice, a little darker blue. Grab that there. Cool. Grab that. And we're going to do the same check. So if it is dark mode, we want to use that color. And if it isn't, we want to use that color. Awesome. Cool. So our styling is like pretty much done. Like not much more. We'll do a couple little tweaks here and there as we need to, but for the documentation, the endpoint documentation we're going to be using, it's literally just called rustcountries.com. But this is going to be where we sort of get all the information we need to work with our API. So it's a really simple API to work with, not super crazy. Like it has a lot of good documentation and there are a bunch of different fields we can get. So let's go ahead and hook that up. So if you've never grabbed an API before, if you've never sort of grabbed the information from an API before, it is fairly straightforward to do with React. What we're going to do is we are going to just make some space here. We're going to set up a little use effect. And within that use effect, we are going to fetch our data. So we're going to use the fetch API here. And the fetch API is something that is like natively built into JavaScript and anybody can use in their project. So whether or not you're building it with React or you're building it with just vanilla JS, you can use fetch to grab your data here. So we're going to go ahead and set up fetch. And we are going to grab, here it is. Yeah, we're going to grab the, or this one here. This is the endpoint for the API. So this is going to give us all of the data. You'll see we won't want to do that in a while, but let's grab all the data and see what it returns first. So we're going to fetch the data at this endpoint. Then we're going to chain a then. So if you remember your work for the promises, then we're going to take that response. And because we don't know what shape that data is coming in, we're going to want to convert it to JSON. So we're going to call the JSON method on it. And then we're going to change one more then. And then after that is done, we are going to take that data and we want to do something with that data. So I'm going to go ahead and create a data object here at the top, set data. And it's just going to be an empty object for now. And bring that import. All right, cool. And then we're going to, when we get that data back, we just want to set data to be the data we get back. And save that. Awesome. So if we've done this correctly, we should have our data and we should be able to just console log that data. So if we hop into the console here, awesome. So all of this is our data. This is the information we're getting back. Oh, and you know what? It's having an infinite loop because I did not put an empty array at the end. Very crucial to do. Don't forget to do that, otherwise you'll have an infinite loop and your app will crash. All right, let's just refresh it and get like one console log or two. All right, cool. So if you check out based on our app here, we can see that we want the flag, the name, the population, the region, and the capital. And that's pretty much all we want to get back. So let's go ahead and grab that instead. So I'm going to use this exact syntax that we have on the right here. I'm just going to do question mark fields equals, and then we're going to write name, flags. I believe it's just capital, region, and population. That should be all that we need to get. If there's more we need to get, we can always come back and add it, but that should be good for now. And then if you go back to the app here and we hit a refresh, we can see that the data we get back is still everything. Refresh. Oh, fields. Very important that you put the right words in the app, otherwise you won't get back what you're expecting. All right, cool. Yes, all right, now we're getting back. So you see it's a much more succinct amount of data, right? We're getting the mock data to be regular data. We could just show 250 lizards. So if I change mock data to just be data, there's so many you can't even see it. Let's go ahead and add a flex wrap. Flex wrap. So it should wrap. All right, cool. But you'll see that we literally just have a super long page with all this information. So what we want to do now is actually take that information and pass it to our card specifically. So let's go ahead and take that data and pass it. Oh, and you know what? It's giving me, this is a TypeScript error I'm getting here. So it says the property map does not exist on empty object, which is what we've initialized it to. So what we have to do is go ahead and initialize our first object while the API is still waiting, or the app is waiting for the API to send a response. We need to initialize that so it matches the shape of our data going forward. So really quickly, this is how we do it. So on line 16 here, where it says data, we can also get rid of this mock data. On line 15, where it says data now, we can go ahead and create our sort of mock country object. So using our preliminary information on the right here, where we have we're going to want to basically just set this up. So we're going to say, we're going to create a name. Add flags. So we need flags, the property of flags. And again, we're going to use the PNG, and we're going to initialize that to an empty string. And then we're going to grab capital, which is going to be an empty array, or an array with just a string value, with an empty string value. We're going to grab population, which we're going to initialize to be 0. So again, what I'm doing here, I'm just matching the types that are provided to us in the app already. So, or in the API, I should say already. So population is going to be 0, and then region, we're going to set to empty string as well, and save that. All right, cool. Let's see what errors we're getting now. So we're getting a data.map error. Also, let me see if there are any questions. Can I use Axios to handle API too? Great question in the chat here. So Axios, yes, we could use that to handle the API. I think people were using Axios a little bit more before Fetch was that prominent. Now that Fetch is prominent, if you do find a use case where you do need Axios, yes, please go ahead and use Axios instead. But Fetch seems to work for the purposes that we have here for now. Could we build an object and import it into state? Clarify that question a little bit and let me answer it better. So could we build an object and import it to state? What do you mean by that? All right, so, oh, you know what? It's giving us an error here because I need to wrap this in an array because it needs to be an array of objects. All right, awesome. Got past that error. Cool, but I'm loving the question in the chat and the hellos. Say hello in the chat if you're joining us from wherever in the world. So let's go ahead and key. Oh, okay. So it's giving us an error here. Key is no longer going to be country because country is now an object. So it's a good error to have. Basically, it means that we are hooking up correctly and things are populated. So let's go ahead and start putting things in our actual in our cards themselves. So country is going to be country dot name dot common. That's going to be our key for now. We're going to use the country name again. And then we're going to pass several things to the card. So we're going to pass the name, which is actually going to be the same thing, country.name.common. And it's giving us an error here because we haven't basically put this as a value we want on the card, but we're going to put that in a second. So name, population is going to be country.name. Like, rather than doing this whole like initialization situation, could I just build another object and use that? Yeah, I could build a separate object and then put it in there. If I was using it across multiple parts of the thing, it would make sense. But because I'm just using it here, I just build this initial object one time and I'll leave it there. But yeah, good question. Definitely could do it multiple times if we could do it in a different place and just use it one time if we were using it multiple times in the app. All right, so hopping back into country card, we're going to go ahead and import what we need. So we need name, population, region, flag, and capital, right? Capital. And it's going to give us an error unless we fix the interface. Again, another TypeScript situation here. But if I just create an interface with the props and just give them all types, that error should go away. So population is going to be a number, region's going to be a string, and flag is going to be a string. And then I'll specify that those props belong to this. Save that. And, oh, I forgot capital. Cool, should be good to go. Awesome. So let's go ahead and drop this into our card now. So go ahead and close this side because we don't really need it. So we'll see that we have the opportunity for an image to go up here. The height is sort of fixed, so we can change that maybe to 20 view height. So because I know it's a little bit like short, but let's go ahead and change the path for the image to be our flag. Let's save that. And flags.png should work. And then we're going to change this to be country flag and save that. All right. Can troubleshoot why that's not working in a second. We'll go through and import the rest of them. So let's go ahead and put the name here in card there. Country. And then we'll get rid of these buttons at the bottom because we don't need them. And what we're going to do here is we are going to actually put each of the sort of options here, population, region, and capital, in their own individual typography elements. So we'll just populate one by one. So we're going to have population. And that's going to be that. And I'm actually going to wrap it in a B tag so it's bold. Just to save having to style each of them individually. And then next to population, we're going to have, and I think this has just stopped updating. I need to refresh it. And then, yeah, on the side, we're going to have the actual population. So as you can see, here, I'll just make it this small. But you'd obviously want to think about it in terms of a larger screen size as a default, or a mobilely responsive as a default, really, and then build up from there. And again, this is like the quick V1 that really just shows you how to work with an API rather than how to style things exhaustively. All right, cool. So we've got our data populating, we've got our images and all our information, like everything is good to go. Any questions in the chat? Instead of doing, okay, cool. No new questions in the chat, but don't worry, Crystal, I will get back to you on that handle change. That is coming in this part. So, but yeah, if you do have any questions, please do drop them on the chat on YouTube. Again, you have to subscribe and be subscribed for about like 5 minutes or so in order to make a chat so we can avoid spam and like, you know, sort of ruining the experience. So now what we're going to do is we are going to add in the actual search functionality. So like right now we see Turks and Caicos there, but if I type in Turks, and nothing is going to happen because we do not have the ability to search. It does not filter for anything. It does not return anything new. Like there is just nothing happening with this app, which is fine. We can fix that. So let's hop into the actual like JavaScript, TypeScript logic bit of what we're going to work on. All right. So now we want to talk about how we are actually going to target these things, right? So there are two things we're going to need to work with. We're going to need to work with this text field, and we're going to need to work with this filter. I'm going to take them one at a time and then combine them into something that works together. I think that's probably the easiest way to do this. So let's start with the text field, because I think that's going to be the primary use case for our user. They want to search for a country, and, you know, they could do that. I mean, granted, they could just press Command F and find the country, but this is like, you know, we're trying to give them a good experience here, right? Because we're giving them this option. So in our text field, what we want to do is access a property called onChange. So what onChange does is it detects any changes that happen within the text field property. So when a user types, that's a change. And so what we want to do is trigger something to happen, have something happen when that property, when that field changes. So the way I want to grab this, I think what I want to do, I'm going to like store it in a variable. I think that's what I'm going to want to do. So on change, I am going to store the value of whatever it's been changed to in a variable. So let's const and say, we'll call it like search value and set search. So we have this value, because I think I'm going to end up using it in a couple different places because I already know I have that region. So I'm trying to be sort of architecturally forward thinking. So I'm going to initialize it to be an empty string. And it's going to, oh, and then we're going to set the search value here. Or, yeah, search value is going to be, or should we, you know what, we should probably do, let's not immediately set it. Let's call it like filter countries here. And I'm going to pass in the event. And let's create the filter countries function. Countries. Okay, so filter countries is going to take in an event. And that event, in that event, I know one thing we're going to do for sure is set the search value to be e.target.value. Or maybe we'll even do that in the lower part of the program here. And oh, I did mismatched event.target.value. All right, cool. So we have the search value as e.target.value or event.target.value. What we then want to do is, so we have our data, right? We have our like all-encompassing data, but then we want to have our like filtered data, right? So I'm going to create another variable and I'm going to call it filtered countries. And then set filtered countries. And it's going to start as an empty array. Cool. So I want to initialize, and you know, I think I'm going to actually end up calling this alongside, or let's leave it there for now. So I want to basically replace data here with filtered countries. So to do that, I need to basically go through filtered countries and determine which country matches like what I'm searching for, right? Yeah, so what we're going to do here is we are going to grab, is it data or do we want to grab filtered countries? Or no, you know what? I'm going to initialize, I'm going to start filtered countries off as data. That's how we're going to start it off. So it's already going to have the value of data. Okay, so we're gonna take data dot filter. We're gonna filter through the data, and we're gonna filter for each country. And if the country dot name dot common. And one really important thing about this and all APIs will return values in whatever format they see fit. So based on what we see here, we know that it's returning, if we look at the countries on the right here, we know that it's returning them in like sort of standard, I think it's like Pascal case, like regular capitalization, which is fine, but our user may not type like Really simple, so it, like, we kind of understand the premise. So we'll do event.target.value to lowercase. Same thing, just without the whole setting and grabbing. All right, cool. So let's go over what we did here. We grabbed the data. We're filtering it for each country in the data. So we know data is an array of countries. We're going to grab the name, the common name of that country, transform it to lowercase, and we want to check that string and see if that string includes whatever our user is typing in the lowercase version, right? So even if they type in all caps, we should still be able to find it. Awesome. What we're going to do now is change, oh, you know what? One more thing, one really important thing. I want to take all this information and I want to set the filtered countries to that and then use that instead. So we're going to say set filtered countries to be all of this. So we're just going to move that into there. Oops, say that. Cool. Awesome. Now we need to do one more thing. We'll hook up data to be filtered countries. Save that. Oh, you know what? We're getting a little error here. So we're getting, let me see if I refresh. Okay, it's giving me the initial value because I think what we want to do, we probably need a loading state. So this often happens when you're like waiting on data. It's going to give you back the default value, and then when the default value is returned, it doesn't update the page. Can I just put data in here and will that update? No, that wouldn't work for us. So let's do an is loading state. So what we're going to do is const is loading, and then set is loading, and we're going to use state, and we're going to set is loading to true. So what is loading is going to do for us is it's going to give us something we can return conditionally. So we're going to say if is loading. So if the page is loading, we want to return a div that says loading. Loading. I can spell loading. Else we want to return what we have, right? So we're getting our loading right here. Cool. We want to change this. We want to trigger a change here in our use effect. After we get the set date, after we set the data to data, we want to then set is loading to false. So it's no longer loading. We've gotten our data, we're good to go. And so once we do that, hopefully it should work. Oh no, it still doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? All right, let's troubleshoot a little bit. See. Than initializing it to data, I think I just need to set it to filtered countries there. Yeah, okay, cool. That fixed our problem. I think we probably don't even need a loading page, but we'll leave it there for now. And we take it out when we determine we really don't need it. All right, so now, if we've done everything correctly, when I search, it shows up. If I search for Canada, it shows up. And it doesn't matter if I type, well, as you can see, I'm typing in common letters and it's showing up, but if I type in capital letters, it still shows up. So we know that our page is actually working correctly. Awesome. Good place to be at. Questions in the comments here. Can you explain what we did with the filter countries, like why we moved the events? Why move the events? Oh, the event. So yeah, the events, I moved this down here, set filter countries instead of initializing it up here, because basically what was happening, right? when the app was initialized, it was setting filtered countries to be data, the initial value of data. And if we look up here on line 16, the initial value of data is actually like pretty much nothing. Population is 0, no flag, nothing there. But it wasn't refreshing once the data, it wasn't like resetting the data it wasn't resetting filtered countries to be the new value of data. So what we really want to do, rather than setting filtered countries to be data there, what we really want to do is actually set filtered countries to update its own value in the use effect. So the use effect triggers whenever a change is made. So the use effect will set the filtered countries to be the data once that data is received. So it will actually keep it up to date when the API changes information. That's why I wanted to set that there. Awesome question. All right, cool. Next thing we want to do, we want to think about filtering by region, right? So we filtered by country. We want to think now, okay, how do we filter by region? So the way we want to handle this is sort of similar. Like every country has a region. And so what we want to happen here is when this changes, it changes. So we've been given some like initial value here, like initial sort of setup work here from the app. So we have a handle change already, which is hooked up to our select component here. And so on change, it's going to call that handle change function. So we can actually just access this here and use this to set our region. So basically right now it's already doing the work for us. It's setting, when this is changed, it's setting the region to be whatever region is specified, which is great. What we want to then do is apply this to our filter. So I think what we're going to have to do is like make a larger sort of like bigger query that's just going to have all of this in together, because they're kind of like 4 cases we have right now, right? So there's like, what if a user is just typing and searching for a country based on like just the text input, right? And no region. There's like no filter on the region. The region is set to all, which is null. That's one version. Or what if there is? Or what if there's a region but no typing? And okay, maybe it's 3 cases. Yeah, a region but no typing. So or there's just like absolutely set absolutely nothing. We want the default value. I guess that's the 4th case. So what we're going to do here is sort of create a larger like use effect, use memo sort of situation, and use that to trigger all of these questions that we want answered. All right, so using a use memo, sort of very similar to a use effect, what we're going to do here is we are going to, what I want to do with this is basically just pass in this logic down here and combine it with this handle change information. So I'm going to initialize a variable called countries, and I'm going to set it to be an empty array. Then what I want to do here is I want to check for the region. So if the region equals empty string, oh, and also, sorry, one more thing. I should have set the value here to be empty string. So empty string is equivalent to nothing, rather than setting it to all, because the API is not going to recognize all. Cool. So I set the region to be an empty string. So if the region is nothing, then we want to set the filtered countries. And it's going to be very similar to what we did here. We're going to take if region is nothing, first what we want to do is we're going to set countries to be data.filter, if region does not equal, let's do it more complicated. So data.filter for country, if the country.region equals region, right? So that's going to be, oh, sorry, did not import that. Import from React. Cool. So yeah, that's going to be the first. Is not nothing. So if it's Americas, Africa, Europe, Asia, whatever, we want to take our countries variable and make it whatever the response of filtering the data to see if the region which we've set on the change, right? We've set the region in the handle change event. We want to see if it matches, and then return all of that into the countries variable, and that's going to be our response. It's complaining here because I didn't pass the empty array. All right, cool. So once we do that, if that is good to go, then we want to set the filtered countries to be countries, right? Yeah, cool. And that works. That's like the simplest version, but we need to consider the filtering as well. So we're going to add another if statement here. So we're going to say if, and this is where we're going to tap into search value. So I think I'm going to want to move, search value. Or no, let's see. I think I'm going to end up getting rid of this filter country. So maybe I'll create something called like handle typing. And I'll just set the search value to be event.target.value. I'll change this filter countries to be handle typing. So that's just going to be when the user types in the text input there. All right. So then in this second if block, what we're going to do is we're going to say if the search value, right? So now we're doing that like additional check. If the search value does not equal null, right? So if there's a value that the user has typed in, then we want to do our filter. But we don't want to do the filter on the data. We want to do filter on our already filtered set of countries. That's where it comes in. All right, so we want to take this, we want to take this logic right here of setting the filtered countries. We're just going to change data to be countries. So it's going to, this countries here on line 63 is referring to the same countries here on 59 and the same countries here on 56. So the countries that have been filtered by region are then filtered to see if it includes the search value to lowercase. So then we'll get a response of not only the countries that are filtered by region, but also the countries that are filtered by user text. Hopefully this makes sense. I'll pause. Once I finish writing this out, then I'll pause and take questions about the filtering, because hopefully I'll answer some of them along the way. All right, so this is like the first if block. So if the region is not null, and if the search value is not null, set the filtered countries to be that. Else, if the region is not null, but the search value is null, just set the filtered countries to be countries, right? Makes sense. Then outside of that if block, so outside like this one, the else will be, so if region, else if, I mean, we don't need to put the if, but just so you can see what I'm saying, like else if region equals empty string, then we want to just do this. We want to just do this check here. But countries would not have been initialized to data, so we're actually just going to take data. Hold on. Yeah, we're just going to take data. Okay. Yes, okay, cool. So let me break down what I'm thinking here, right? So we have countries, an empty array. If the region is not null, we're going to set this empty array to be the data filtered by the region. If there's also a value for the search value, we're then going to filter that countries array that now has the filtered data to filter it even further for the country. If we don't have a search value, we're just going to return that initially filtered value for the region. But on the flip side, if the region is nothing, but we do have the user typing in, so this is like the initial filtered countries function that we created. So if we do have the user typing something in, then we want to set the filtered countries to be that data. So we're skipping the initializing the countries situation. We're just going to take the data. We want to filter it as we did before, just for whatever they're typing in, whatever that search value is, and do that. If the search value has nothing, then we really just want to set filtered countries to be data like we did initially, and nothing changes. So it's just giving us back everything. And that should be good. So we want to pass in data. People want to pass in region. So basically, these are the things that are gonna be. It's gonna cause the use memo to re-render. So if the data changes, right? If we get some new countries or whatever, if the region changes, or if the search value changed, and those are the 3 things we want to check for with our app. And I think that's it. So if I've done this correctly, I should be able to search for Canada. And if I check Americas and then I search for Canada, I should still get Canada. But if I do something like France, right, I'm not getting it in Americas. But if I go to Europe and I type in France, then I get it. Awesome. Questions, comments, and concerns. All right, cool. No questions. All right, hopefully this is like clear as mud then. Awesome. We're going to get rid of this filtered countries function here and clean this up a little bit. And yeah, I think we've done pretty much everything we need to do. We have dark mode and we have light mode. We have the ability to search for a country, so I can search for France. I can search for Jamaica. Oh, sorry, I need to change the region to America, Jamaica. And yeah, so hopefully this tutorial has been really helpful to you. Again, if you do have any questions, please throw them in the chat before we finish up here. But yeah, so let me just go over what we did. So we created a country search app from nothing using just a Next.js Material UI TypeScript starter file. We grabbed some data from the REST Countries API available at restcountries.com. We used frontendmentor.io for our design inspiration, but didn't really get any sort of data or anything from them, just sort of the design idea. We created dark mode and light mode in our app using Zustand to sort of control our state and store the global state of is dark mode or is light mode. And then we got the data back from our API. We filtered it for just the fields that we actually needed. So that was name, flags, capital, region, population, just the things we're actually going to use in this app. And then we displayed that. And then we worked on our JavaScript logic. We worked with a filter here. So we worked we filtered our data. We used to lowercase. We used the methods includes. We set the filtered data. We're talking about using state in React. So we're using React hooks and things like that to set our state. And then we did a sort of like a double filter. We nested if statements in order to get the sort of response that we were looking for. Again, there are cleaner ways to do this, but this is just sort of like a quick way to get it done for the purpose of our tutorial. But yeah, we filter by region. So if we want to just see places in a certain region, we can do that filter as well. Or if we want both to happen, we did some filtering to allow that to happen as well. So yeah. Hopefully this tutorial is helpful for you. If you do have any questions, please feel free to leave comments under this below on the video on YouTube so that I can go back and answer your questions after the fact. If you do have any questions or you are interested in learning how to be a front-end web developer, you can check out my website, davidsonprogrammingacademy.com. I'll link that down below as well. So yeah, if you are interested in that, check the link in the description below. It's davidsonprogrammingacademy.com. As I said, we have a bunch of courses, a bunch of mentorship options available. Yeah, and if you do have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. I love chatting with folks about this sort of thing. But yeah, other than that, I will see you guys in the next one.